Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast on this joyous occasion. My name is Eli,
I'm Jesse.
and we are here because, as reported by Mr. Jeff Passan today, the Orioles will be promoting Jackson Holliday, the number one prospect in all of baseball, the number one prospect in our system, certainly, uh, and an overall phenomenal talent, to join the big league club in Boston tomorrow. I'll run off a couple quick stats here so we can get them out of the way, and then we'll come to Jesse for a vibe check. First off, in 9 AAA games this year, he's triple slashing 342, 490, 605, an OPS of almost 1100. He has more walks than strikeouts. This stint, his OPS is 300 points higher than it was in his small stint at AAA last year. And as a matter of fact, each portion of his triple slash is better than his overall line last year, which 80% of the games were at lower levels. He's on a tear. I know it's a small sample size, but clearly the guy was not intent on staying in Norfolk for very long. Jess, how you feeling?
Feeling excited. I'm like shocked, but I'm excited. So it'll
Yeah.
be good to have him up here, and our roster is going to be a bit better now.
Do you think that the Orioles lineup could potentially be in need of a little bit of juice right now?
We could, yeah. I mean, the Red Sox game was pretty good overall
Right.
today. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to focus on Holiday here, but yeah, the offense has been a little sluggish to say the least. So yeah, he'll be a nice addition, hopefully.
Yeah, I agree. Um, a couple quick notes in getting the promotion at this time. A bunch of us, including myself, were trying to do live math on Twitter, and it wasn't working very well. But Jackson Holliday is eligible to receive a full year of service time, assuming he stays with the big league club for the duration of this season. And furthermore, he is eligible for the prospect promotion incentive. Uh, for those who are forgetting or are not aware, the PPI is something that was implemented coming out of the previous CBA negotiations. And it is an incentive where a team, if they promote somebody who is on 2 of 3 prospect lists in the top 100. They promote them early enough to get a full year of service time, and that person is then in the first or second standing at the end of the year for Rookie of the Year voting. The team will then get a compensatory draft pick at, as a reward for pushing their prospects and not manipulating service time. Um, I think it's significant that you know this is emblematic of the fact that it was not a service time manipulation thing that sent Jackson Holliday to AAA. That was, as we talked about on this podcast, that was something that I had suspected. Uh, that was my original read on the situation. But I guess, what is your take, Jess, on, you know, like what originally sent Jackson Holliday to AAA at this point, and why do you think the Orioles are promoting him now?
Well, and just to clarify, you're saying it's not a service time manipulation situation, because they're calling them up now, but they still have some ability to do that
Sure.
moving
Yeah.
forward.
So
They could still manipulate his service time. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, to be clear, yeah, that is a good point. If Holiday struggles at all, or even if he doesn't struggle, and is seemingly behind in Rookie of the Year running or something of that sort, they could send him to AAA for 2 weeks and it would all be done. He would lose his year of service time, and I would assume that he's not on a Rookie of the Year trajectory or second in Rookie of the Year trajectory um, voting trajectory. uh, I would assume he's not on that trajectory if we are demoting him mid-season. And that's a calculation the Orioles will make. But if he is down for more than just a couple days at this point, that does lose him the nominal year of service time that he would have accrued by being on the major league roster for 172 days this year. That's right.
Yeah. So can you repeat your question?
Yeah. So I guess very simply, like, do you think the prospect promotion incentive is the thing driving them to promote him now? Do you think there was Yeah, and
Well,
why was he sent down? Do you think that the Orioles ever really thought he wasn't one of the best 26 players in this org?
well, it seems like the prospect promotion point has to be at least somewhat enticing to the Orioles because they're doing it at this exact moment when they basically have to act in order for him to be in consideration and for the Orioles to be in consideration through Holliday for it. Of course, the Orioles could have potentially gotten the pick, as I think Tyler potentially theorized before in our uh, predictions before the year started, that like Kowser might get rookie of the year or might be in
Right.
contention for it. So, but in order for the Orioles to get it through Holiday had to come up at this time. So yeah, I mean, there's no other reason the Orioles do it right now rather than in a few weeks. Other than I mean, arguably, yes, they're gonna have a slightly better roster for a couple more weeks. Or a better roster for a couple more weeks, probably not a slightly better roster. I think he does make a substantial impact. Um, but in terms of yeah, the pick has to be potentially a big motivator in the Orioles deciding to do this. As far as why they didn't just put him on the roster on opening day, I mean, that's a little bit of a conundrum. It's hard to believe the explanations of why he got sent down really held up. I mean, he's only played in a handful of games at AAA, in large part because the AAA season starts a week or so later than the Major League season. So he's only in the Major League season, we're only a couple weeks into it. So um, why they didn't just start him off on the major league roster is a bit of a question. But overall, yeah, I mean, we're excited he's here now, of course, but the pick has to be a motivating factor for them calling him up at this moment.
Yeah, I think that um, obviously the Orioles did strike gold on the prospect promotion incentive by having Gunnar on the roster all year last year and him obviously winning Rookie of the Year. Um, People noted that as a factor in the Corbin Burns trade, where we were giving one of those comp round picks to the Brewers as part of that exchange, but it was kind of a wash for us because we were also gaining an extra comp round pick this year because of Gunnar winning Rookie of the Year. So it definitely is a thing that I think entices the Orioles. Obviously, we are in the last 5 years or so one of the most successful teams drafting. The pipeline is full, it is bursting at the seams, and we seem like we are gluttonous, wanting more and more. Yeah, I agree. The prospect promotion incentive is the reason Jackson Holliday is joining the team tomorrow. Um, as to why he did not on opening day, though, it's really a bizarre thing to me. I can't understand the logic behind saying that these 9 games at AAA really changed the calculus in any way, shape, or form. Um, and I think even more confusingly, we can get into this a little more, in the next question, but seemingly the guy who was the odd man out would be Tony Kemp, who we signed, I think, largely because Holliday did not make the opening day roster. We signed him for $1 million, and I don't think we're paying somebody $1 million to come hang out for a week and a half and then leave. Just it fundamentally did not make sense. Um, and so, you, I think in the most ridiculous way, maybe the simplest explanation is that the Orioles genuinely did want Holliday to get more time at second base in game. I I
Well,
still like. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I mean, potentially the way it makes sense is if he's not in contention and he gets demoted. If he gets demoted for a week, that's less time, that has to be covered through the process. If he
Yeah.
started the year, they'd have to demote him for a month or something, or closer to a month. So I guess in that way it makes sense. Uh, but I don't know how much you're buying that.
Yeah. So the first thing to me, um, I, if I remember correctly, an optional assignment has to be 7 days long unless you um, unless there's an injury on the major league roster that like then pulls you back. So you know, all in all, like 185 or 186 day season, and excuse me, it's 172 days that you need to be on the roster for a full year of service time. If he was, if he has to be down there for 7 days on an optional assignment, and you are, I guess you're like going so far as to say we are demoting this guy, he's struggling, and you're already willing to do that, then the difference I think between keeping him down there for 1 week, that's the mandatory minimum, or 2 weeks doesn't make that much of a difference to
Right,
me.
right. Hmm.
Um, so I don't fully see that. It's really weird. It's not like facing left-handed pitching, like,
Which
and,
is
and
what we were
especially
told, right?
right. If it's anything regarding, you know, facing pitching of any sort, and what it took was seeing him against the White Sox AAA team, just one of the most barren farm systems in all of Major League Baseball. It's against that team and him having success that convinces you he's finally ready, then Mike Elias is not the brilliant mastermind that we think he is.
Right. Well, and to be clear, I mean, you know, it is obvious that this was the plan all along to pull him up at
Right.
this exact moment in time.
Yeah. So I guess then let's get into it. Are you buying that the Orioles went ahead and said Tony Kemp will give you $1 million to come hang out for 2 weeks?
This is what I cannot accept that the Orioles made that decision. I will not, and I cannot accept that the Orioles decided to do that. Because there's no way Kemp will stick around the organization if he's the guy. So I'm convinced. Well, I guess I'm not convinced. I do have some question marks about it. But if I and I don't bet, but if I had to bet, I would bet on it being Westberg that gets demoted.
Really?
Yeah.
So our co-host Tyler made a facetious tweet today saying, you know, I think he said the emotions on here, referring to Twitter, the emotions on here when Westberg is the corresponding move tomorrow are going to be unbelievable. Um, and already got some unbelievable quote unquote reactions of people not liking Tyler's joke. So obviously it was satirical in nature, but yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to go that far, but it seems like what we've talked so many times, even on this podcast, about the Orioles playing this game of just maintaining roster flexibility and trusting that the bottom line of this team is enough to keep them in the race, enough to keep them in a decent standing through the first month of the year, and let the roster figure itself out. Like April is just extended spring training for the Orioles front office. So from that standpoint, it would almost make a bunch of sense to, yeah, option Westberg and continue just rolling with the configuration of this team that enables you to figure it out later. Like, and it's a little bit problematic in my mind because I don't think that Westberg has anything to learn at AAA. He hasn't had the hottest start, but we saw him last year. He's a mid 700s OPS guy. He plays solid defense. He is ready for the big leagues at this point. Um, so I think it would be a frustrating move, and I think the Orioles fans would be furious. But I think there's some logic in it, in that it gives you, and I feel like we've been saying this for 57 years. We've like been saying it gives the Orioles time to figure out a trade and figure out what they want to do with this roster, and it feels like they've just been kicking the can down the road infinitely. Um, but it does seem like we could kick the can down the road a little bit farther here. And since you did sign Tony Kemp to a fully guaranteed $1 million contract, do you waste the $980,000 of value that you haven't gotten out of him yet, or do you just keep him on the roster a little longer until you figure it out? I think
a
I
million
think there's
dollars
logic
is a
there.
lot to $1 million is a lot to spend on a guy who didn't get a hit for you. And Tony Kemp has not yet done that. So
It's a good point. It's a very good point.
um
Uh,
the one I mean I yeah. So I mean the one thing also I'll say about this is, like, it's sort of another situation where if you option Westberg, first of all, Westberg ideally his trajectory is such that his options in the future won't be relevant, because he's going to be good enough. He's going to be on the big league club, and he's never going to be in a situation. So an option for him is like nothing, right? It's sort of like the now obviously this is not the same, but if Manny Machado or if Jackson Holliday, right,
Right.
needs to be optioned, no, the Orioles front office is not going to worry about, oh my gosh, that's one less option we have for
Right.
Jackson Holliday, right? So it's obviously it's not that extreme with Westberg. Westberg is not the talent of Jackson Holliday, but an option for him at this point in his career is not a big deal, right? Whereas like you lose Kemp, right? If you cut him basically. So if that's going to be the situation, then why would you not send Westberg down and then all it takes is like an injury in a week or week and a half for Westberg to be right back up. Whereas like if you cut Kemp and you keep Westberg and then someone gets hurt, well, then it's a little dicier who you're bringing up. Like Kemp is going to be a better option, more, most likely than whoever would get. I mean, right.
I
Like,
think people would counter the Connor
I,
Norby or Kobe Mayo. I understand
right.
though. Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I mean, they obviously don't want them in the majors yet, either of them in the majors yet. They don't want to expose them too early and they need their development and that sort of thing. So, um, yeah, I mean,
Connor
arguably,
Norby has been at Norfolk for 3 years now. So
yeah, I mean, and even with Mayo too, like Mayo is close as well. So,
yeah, yeah,
but so if but yeah, then Kemp is just gone permanently. Whereas like Westberg is very, very accessible, and they have Westberg is not hitting right now. He's hitting really poorly despite some late game dramatics. So not that I think that this warrants a demotion for him or he's earned it or anything like that. Like I don't think any of those things because it's very early and the guys are just getting their timing down. But like why not just put Westberg down in AAA for a little while we figure things out?
yeah. And I will stress that Jesse and myself fully understand here that the why not is that you are not putting your best 26 players on the 26-man roster. That's like I don't think anybody is trying to argue that Tony Kemp's upside is comparable or better than Jordan Westberg's. But in the bench role that they are both playing, or Westberg has been starting games. I shouldn't say that, but in when Jackson Holliday is up, and you then are like rotating just the third base spot between Mateo, between Odias, between Westberg. I don't know if Mateo will actually play, but just
Yeah,
rotating guys in, not playing third. But Holliday maybe slides over to third one day, he goes over to second, something. He's
right,
in the
right.
rotation is the point.
Yeah.
Um, but just to say, like, it is Westberg as a part of that little platoon really going to be all that much more valuable than a Tony Kemp? And I think the argument, and again, we are arguing this side because everybody else would not be saying it, and it's just kind of a devil's advocate situation. Um, but I think the argument is that you maintain this roster flexibility, and that is more valuable than whatever they could contribute in this limited role, or whatever the delta is between Kemp's poor play and just Jordan Westberg's moderately good play. Um, and so I think it's a possibility we are all not excited for, but I do think it's a possibility. Um, do you think there's any chance that some other optionable uh, member of the team goes, like a Jonathan Heasley or something of that sort, and we go a man down in the bullpen?
I think that's unlikely. I mean, I think it is a possibility. But if the bullpen was more of a strength for this team right now, I'd feel more confident and in that being a potential option. But because the bullpen has been dicey to say the least, in this first start of the season, And especially with the back end not looking great right now, and then putting more pressure on the middle relief and having one option less for Brandon Hyde to navigate these games. I think that wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I think at this point, yeah, I think Westberg just makes more sense from that perspective. Definitely Heasley is arguably right around there with Kemp in terms of like the last, sort of the last guy on the team, the 26th guy. Um, so obviously Westberg sort of like will brings more value to the team, but Heasley is just a bullpen place, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's really what it's about. It's about shrinking the options in the bullpen, and I think the Orioles will be reluctant to do that.
Yeah. Fully understood. I guess then if you're putting money on it, what is your money on? Who do you think is the corresponding move?
Westberg,
Really? Okay.
yeah, and
I'm
what are
not
you
sure.
saying?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm fully ready to go to that point. I do think it'll be Kemp, but putting my like front office Elias brain on, yeah, I definitely see the Westberg argument. Uh, it
I
is moderately disappointing, and you can hear all of the fans right now saying, "Why are we not just putting our 26 best players on the field and going to town?"
right,
And that's just very fundamentally not the consideration for the front office right now. And they're
right,
saying we have this collection of value by means of the talent that we have accrued, and how do we shuffle that around in the way that ends up when the trade deadline comes around in July, that ends up with the best collection of 26 men on this team.
right,
And I think that is the calculus, and I think they are trying to play the long game, and we are all frustrated, that we're not doing what the Rays did at the beginning of last year, jumping off to an insane double-digit lead in the first couple weeks, double-digit game lead in the division, that is, within the
right.
first couple weeks of the season.
Well, then I guess my question is, why do you think it'll be Kemp? I mean, if we know this about the Orioles front office, if we know they emphasize flexibility, if we know that them going with Kemp would defy sort of the way of Mike Elias, why do
Right.
you think it? Why would you not say it would be Westberg?
I think I think it's partially a reluctance as a fan to see, like, I don't want to call Westberg a foundational piece. I think that some fans get carried away with how good they think he is. This very, very simply is not somebody who's ever going to hit 25 home runs. This is not somebody who's ever going to hit 350. This is a guy with a like really nicely well-rounded set of tools, and he will be a league average or slightly above league average hitter, by just like solid contributions across the board. But I think for all intents and purposes, I think the Orioles see the infield of the future on this team being Kobe Mayo, Gunnar Henderson, and Jackson Holliday, and Jordan Westberg in a backup role. And I think he's overqualified for a backup role. I think he would start on multiple teams in the league right now, every single day. Um, but he fundamentally is not, I think, at the level that a lot of people consider him to be, in Orioles fandom, and I think that's because he's come up, he's done some very cool like uh, kind of ragtag things throughout his debut last year. He's a scrappy kind of player, and he's very lovable. Like I find myself feeling that same thing for him. Um, but so I think it is the fan in me a little bit pushing back against the notion of demoting a guy like that who came up last year, established himself, had a great run, and then, win in comparison to this player who is clearly inferior in Tony Kemp. And, like Tony Kemp has been a great player for many years, and I will give him credit for that, but I think it is partially the fan in me. And then I also think there is an aspect of, you know, Jordan Westberg is so much more integral and not that he's one of the more colorful personalities on the team, but more integral to how the team functions, I think, as a unit, because he has come up through the minors with Gunnar, with Cowser, with Adley, with all of these people. And I think there is a element of that the Orioles want to maintain. You want to maintain, I don't want to say like the good vibes because it's a lazy phrase and overused, but maintain the cohesiveness of that unit moving through the season. So, there are obviously arguments to keeping Westberg on the team, saying forget the money. I'm not really worried about it. It's just a couple $100,000 over the league minimum. So scrapping somebody who is pre-arb would be pretty close to scrapping a Tony Kemp at this point. And I think that's like an important thing to note is that this money shouldn't really matter to the Orioles. But yeah, it is an open question just by virtue of this. This is not something the Orioles would ever do. It's just give $1 million and then say,
Yeah, I
uh,
just can't get around that because
yeah,
if we accept that the plan was the whole time to have Holliday here at this time, just how does it make any sense to then go sign Kemp if he
right,
was always going to be the guy that got,
right, yeah. In my
pushed out the
mind,
door?
if that's the situation, yeah, you bring up Connor Norby for a couple weeks. You let Norby sit it. You give him, whatever the league minimum prorated over 2 weeks is. You give him $50,000 or whatever, probably even less than that, and then you send him back down, to do exactly what he is doing right now. So
Right.
I agree. I think that the only possibilities are that Holliday has actually managed to surprise the Orioles with how well he's been hitting down there, how well he's handled second base, um, or that the Orioles are not planning to scrap Tony Kemp after 2 weeks and 6 at-bats or whatever it was.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 9 at bats he's had so far. And he had a walk, I think. But
I was
um
just looking at it.
oh, okay.
I'll double
But
check myself.
yeah.
Good.
Uh which was it?
Thanks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I mean, yeah. I mean, again, with the Orioles like being surprised by Holiday, like I don't really buy that either.
I know.
And it is about the if we know it's about the compensation pick, then if we know it's about the draft pick, then we can there was nothing that swayed the Orioles in a week that, oh
Right.
no, Holiday is actually capable of winning Rookie of the
Right.
Year.
Right.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
I agree. That they had a whole off season of collecting data on him in a tunnel. It's all, yeah, very, very simple. They knew probably since partway through spring training when he started hitting the ball well that okay, he will be up by this time. We are going for it. He will like be our bid for the prospect promotion incentive. Yeah.
the one thing I do just
So
want to the one that oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna move on. So if you got a point, go ahead.
The one thing I was just going to dismiss is the idea that it's going to be Urias. Like as a possibility, I'm very confident in that will not be the guy. Um, yeah, he's been a solid major leaguer for years, and he should stay on this team. So
It would be a very interesting call. I think, yeah, people have a lot of frustration with him, and I don't, I think it's partially a kind of combination of like being excited for the young guys coming up and then coupling that with this is one of the guys who has been here for multiple years, and has been just a backup or kind of like intermittent platoon kind of role for that entire time. And so like this is the kind of guy we are supposed to be replacing at this point in time. And I think that's where a lot of the resentment of him is coming from. And I do understand that, but yeah, I mean, he has been, about a 2 WAR player or so for the last couple of years, which is, or a bench player, literally all you can ask for.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think that is right. That sort of analysis is overlooking, his valuable contributions. I mean, as a guy who won a gold glove, people people don't talk about this or like
Yeah.
emphasize this with him. He is a gold glover at third base. So um
Yeah, and I guess the other thing about that is, there are schools of thought, and I'm not entirely sure that I fully subscribe to them, but there are schools of thought that, if you like in some far off world, if Jackson Holliday were just as good as he is, and we brought him up to be, a backup utility infielder for us and play the role that Tony Kemp or Jorge Mateo is playing right now, then that is a waste of his talents. And it's not just, for him, it's a waste of his talents for us. You trade that and you like reinvest that value into a position that actually needs it and will be able to contribute on the daily, like so if you say that Kobe Mayo would hit better than Ramon Rodriguez in major leagues right now, I'm not saying I'm going to disagree with you, but I'm saying, and this is not what Kobe Mayo should be either. This is just hypotheticals. If you are bringing somebody up to just serve in a backup reserve role, then there is an argument to say you don't necessarily want the best option available to you in that you want to trade the best option where you will get equal value back for them. And then this reserve role would just be what it is with somebody who is good enough to fill it. And then you are upgrading another part of the team and it's a more efficient allocation of resources.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah. Anyway, got off on a tangent with that, but I,
Makes sense.
let's back up, refocus on Jackson Holliday. But very simply, what role do you think Holliday will be playing? Is he instantly stepping in as the everyday second baseman?
I think basically, I think he'll play most days. I wouldn't be surprised. So I think he will largely stay at second base. I think if like I think if Henderson has an off day at shortstop, I think it's probably going to be Mateo that slides over there. So I do think Holiday's position for the time being will be second base, and I think yeah he'll play there almost all the time. You know, up in the range of 5 or 6 days a week. Maybe if a lefty pitches, then Mateo will come in for him, and Mateo I think can be used very sort of sparingly and situationally, and as a backup for him at second base. But overall, I think he's going to get the lion's share of the playing time at second base, and I think that's going to be his only position for the most part.
Yeah, no, I agree on all fronts. I got one more question here before we wrap it up, and this one's a bit of a funnier one, and that is, how bad do you think Jackson Holliday would have to be in order to get demoted?
Well, arguably, I mean, not necessarily that bad. At least to get demoted one time. So
Jesse is not a believer in the virtues of Michael Lyons.
yeah, no.
Think they're gonna have a quick trigger.
No, yeah, yeah, I guess yeah, I wouldn't think of him as like the most virtuous person there is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, arguably he wouldn't have to perform that poorly. I mean, who knows? If he's hitting sub 200 at a certain point, uh I mean, potentially he could go down in a month if it really doesn't go well or something like that. A month or two. If he really has some sort of drastic struggle. I mean, we can remember when Adley really struggled hitting wise when he first came up, and the Orioles were willing to be patient and ride with that. And I think the Orioles will likely be patient in the situation with Holliday too. But I think that if he does get demoted, it's probably going to be earlier on in his time. So it's going to be more toward the front of his time with the Orioles than toward the end of the year, because I think, especially with the Orioles gearing up for playoffs and stuff like that at that point in time, and hopefully preparing for that, I don't think they're going to want him if they want him to go fix something or work on something in AAA. They're going to want to have him do that early so he can sort that out and then return and be yeah, a big part of the team down the stretch and into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the point about stability heading into the playoffs is a really valid one. And yeah, I tend to agree. If something were to happen, it would happen early. And I think that, you talk about sticking through it with Adley, and you could argue they stuck through it with Gunner early last season as well. Um, but and those are obviously, you know, the direct comparisons because they were also top, number one prospects. But there is also kind of conversely, there was the Grayson Rodriguez demotion last year, as well as the Colton Cowser demotion last year. Um, and, neither of them really got a ton of runway before they got the hook. That's not to say like they deserved more or anything like that, but they went down, have made corrections. Cowser really stayed down for most of last year and obviously looks like a new person at the big league level. I mean, well, in spring training, he had two doubles today, but so I do think there is precedent for the Orioles to pull the trigger. Um, but yeah, I tend to lean on the side of they're going to let him work through it. They trust in, just the raw talent. He clearly has this immense amount of, and it's as simple as that. So with that, Jess, you got any final thoughts?
No, I mean I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, I mean I think that makes sense. The only thing I would say is with Henderson, uh I don't know how much exactly it's a comparison because he had a really good month the prior season at the
For
big
sure.
league level and then starting the new season struggled, whereas Adley got promoted and then immediately struggled and hadn't had that. But other than that, it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, Cowser isn't exactly the level of prospect that Holliday is. But yeah, so there's a little difference in comparison there. But overall, I hear your point. Yeah.
I agree. He's not the same level, but Cowser is number 14, according to MLB pipeline and such. So there definitely is an immense amount of talent there. And they're not like, it's not handling somebody who's a top 15 prospect in the system or anything like
Right,
that.
right.
This is legit. Uh,
Makes sense.
anyway,
Cool.
digress. Um,
We'll
yeah,
see
I,
what he
I think,
does. And yeah, we'll
yeah,
we'll be back to talk about it.
yeah. To sum it up for me, I think I think that we have accrued this talent, through the Orioles rebuild. 2022 was like the last, I guess I should say 2021 was like the last rough season. It was the third 100 loss season since Elias took over, and it was the third out of the three full seasons. And then in 22, we finally started to take those steps forward. In 23, obviously, we did what we did. We made a documentary about it. Um, and, this is like the last true gemstone. I shouldn't even really say that because we have so much more talent in the minor leagues. But this is the last, number one prospect. I can't even say that because Samuel Basayo is there. We're going to have plenty of prospects coming up, but this feels important because he was the last top pick and he's the last number one pick we're hopefully going to have for a very long time.
Right.
Um, and it feels significant in that way. It's this trio of a run of number one prospects that have kept us, as the top farm system, the top number one prospect in baseball for 3 years running between Adley, Gunner, and now Holliday. Um, this is a special dude, and it feels like a special momentous occasion that it's like the Orioles are starting to reach that pinnacle, and the core is now in place. Like the Death Star is assembled now. So you got to be excited.
Definitely. Do you think he plays today?
Oh yeah. And we say today because now it's like
Right.
2:30 in the morning.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was in at work until midnight. This is an emergency pod, and Jesse was kind enough to stay up for me. But
Yeah. Do
um,
so you have him starting at second base against the Red Sox on
oh
Wednesday.
yeah,
Okay.
oh
Cool.
yeah.
It'll be exciting.
Say
We'll
screw it.
find out.
I want him to hit. I think it would be kind of hilarious if he it's just the weakest home run on his first day, just hooks around the pesky pole,
Basketball,
it's
yeah.
no more than 285 feet.
Yeah.
Uh, I would love it.
I
So,
would love if he did that against the Red Sox. So
oh
that'd be
yeah,
great. Yeah,
we'll take any goodness against the Red Sox.
absolutely. So
All right.
cool.
Well, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. We appreciate you guys listening. As always, if you could be so kind as to follow the show, subscribe, give us a rating if you like us, and always, we say it every time, and it is not. I'm just going to say the email inbox is not overfilled with our glorious fan mail and everything. So, but definitely reach out to us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. Can also find us on Twitter at the Warehouse Pod. Love chatting over there, of course. Um, yeah, you got anything else, Jess?
Nope.
Cool. This has been the Warehouse Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Welcome to Birdland, Jackson Holiday. My name's Elijah,
I'm Jesse.
and we will talk to you next time.